I didn't see it. Check or something.
No, it's not on yet. No, we haven't.
All right, we're. Let me just. I want to tap Mr. Kelly. Exactly. A minute later, we good? We're good? We're good? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our May 23rd Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I just want to go through the evacuation procedures. What's the echo? Is there an echo? There's- Testing.
Yeah, one of the TVs has a speaker on.
Serious time delay. This is going to be awkward. Just saying. Does this fall under IT? All right, let's try this again. Still on. All right. We're gonna go old school pretty soon and shut everything off. Shh. Strike that from the minutes. All right, good evening, everyone. I'll start over here. Welcome to our May 23rd Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I do want to go through the evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, please exit the two doorways to the left or the one in the front here. We would cross Middle Road and meet at the school administration building and await further instruction at that point. Now, if we could all stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. All right, let us begin with our roll call.
Ms. Jukusa? Here. Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Katzman?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguilar?
Here. Okay, next we will go through the president's executive summary. There was no executive sessions tonight, so the only thing I would like to bring up is that for those of you who might be here for new business number 2 tonight, which is a request to advertise for a public hearing for a sound variance for the annual Father's Day car show, that has been withdrawn. Okay. We'll move on to our presentations, recognitions. We have 2 proclamations. First proclamation is proclamation honoring Alan Shears. Whereas Alan James Shears of Portsmouth, Rhode Island, was born in Berwyn, Illinois, and attended public schools and earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Brown University, where he played varsity basketball. Whereas Alan became an active member of his community, working as a real estate broker, appraiser, and consultant for 40+ years, and was active in public service in many capacities, including a member of the Town of Portsmouth School Committee, where he was chair of the Capital Subcommittee, a member of the Personnel Subcommittee, and the School Committee representative on the District Safety Committee, an alternate member of the Portsmouth Zoning Board, a member of the Portsmouth Juvenile Hearing Board, chairman of the Portsmouth Housing Committee for the Portsmouth RI Comprehensive Plan, a member of the Portsmouth Citizens Interested in the Comprehensive Plan Committee, a member of the Portsmouth West Side Development Advisory Committee, treasurer of the Portsmouth Water Board, board member of the Newport County Board of Realtors, a past president of the Middletown Lions Club. Whereas Alan was a fierce advocate of public education and not afraid to stand up for the best interests of students. Whereas Alan passed away on Friday, November 5th, 2021 in Providence, Rhode Island. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Town Council of the Town of Portsmouth expresses our sincere appreciation and thanks to Alan Shears for his service to the town, our schools, and the larger community, and give our deepest condolences to his family. In recognition whereof, I, as president of the Portsmouth Town Council, have hereby set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island, to hereto affix this 23rd day of May, 2022. That's it.
Thank you.
Yes. And I mean, for those of you that knew Alan, you know, he was definitely a advocate for the students in Portsmouth. And he was definitely a dedicated person to trying to make Portsmouth a better place. And he has been missed. And, you know, we did pass along our condolences, and Alan he was a friend. So we will move on to the next proclamation. It's a proclamation in appreciation and thanks to the city of Portsmouth, UK. I should have Mr. Kelly read this, but I will take the honor here. The town of Portsmouth in the state of Rhode Island of the United States of America takes pleasure in offering this proclamation of appreciation and thanks. Whereas the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island was founded on the Compact of 1638, and whereas the founders of the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island considered the connection with your honorable city to honor it with your name, and whereas that we wish to continue to build a strong bond we have formed with yours and other Portsmouth Atlantic Compact communities, and whereas we have been honored by many visits by representatives of your city to our beautiful town, which have included several visits by your Lord Mayors and councilors, and whereas their attendance and participation at many events that included the 375th anniversary celebration of our town, having strengthened the common bonds and historical links between our two communities and offered a unique and personal sense of friendship, which has been deeply appreciated by the many citizens they have met. And whereas you have offered great hospitality and friendship to our citizens on their official visits and personal visits to the UK that have encouraged continued and expanding relations between our two communities. And whereas on a national perspective, we honor the sacrifices of all the British people and their support of World War I and D-Day of World War II that have been memorialized by your city in annual celebrations. We wish to convey our thanks to all British citizens, and in particular those Portsmouth, UK, for their efforts that were essential to victory. And whereas our delegations have thoroughly enjoyed participating in mutual cooperation programs that have been supported by many trips to Portsmouth, UK, that have included government, education, religious, military, and cultural leaders throughout your fair city. And whereas several of our citizens attended last year's Lord Mayor making via Zoom due to the coronavirus pandemic, we are aware that your fair city recently celebrated the 828th anniversary of its founding. We're also aware that you have installed Portsmouth City Councilor Hugh Mason. He was one of the first councilors that were engaged with prior to our 375th anniversary. We congratulate him and all the citizens of the city of Portsmouth. Whereas the Town Council of Portsmouth of the state of Rhode Island has charged our fellow citizens and elected town councilor Andrew Kelly to deliver this proclamation. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Town Council President Kevin Aguirre of Portsmouth, Rhode Island, do hereby announce and proclaim to all citizens and set seal hereto our special recognition and thanks to the City Council of Portsmouth, United Kingdom, and its citizens. We look forward to our future continued superb relations. Thank you. When will you be delivering that, Andrew? Soon. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. First item is an entertainment license, Newport Film, 174 Bellevue Avenue, Suite 314, for film screening at Safe Harbor New England Boat Works, 1 Lagoon Road on July 14th from 6 to 10:30 p.m. And then a second one from Newport Film on July 21st, actually at the International Polo Grounds, Linden Lane, on July 21st, from 6 to 10:30 PM.
Move to approve both.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have the peddler's license, a mobile food establishment. It's new for J&W Ice Cream, Inc., DBA Clementine's Homemade Ice Cream, 62 Wave Ave, Middletown.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman? Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have a request approval for a temporary seasonal expansion of a service area. This is for Locals Inc. at 657 Park Ave.
Move to approve. This is their
This was
normal
the s-
outside seating they do every year.
Yeah, this was the same one that they've been doing for the last couple of years.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have the public hearing for the liquor application. This was continued from our previous meeting. Ms. West, did we hear from these folks?
They're here.
Oh, come on up. Okay,
We're looking to reinstate the pre-existing liquor and food service that the Newport Beach Club had. Only the prior entity has been dissolved, so we applied as a new entity. And that's what we're looking to do, is provide the same food and beverage service to the members of the now Narragansett Bay Club, formerly Newport Beach Club, at the pool complex.
And for the record, it's a completely new ownership group.
Yes.
The previous
absolutely,
owner is-
completely new, and as of last April, that was bought anew.
okay. So that's for that's, are we doing both parts of this? The first is the application for the license, and second is a request approval for the permanent expansion of the service area for food and alcohol service in the area of the pool building, pool facility, and surrounding fenced-in pool area. So, yeah.
Yes, as I understand that was what was pre-existing. I understand that outside the pool complex, like towards some of the beach and pier, was previously not the area we served in. So apparently, since it's the outdoor of the indoor of the facility itself, the dining area, we within the walls, the 6-foot fence of the pool complex is the
Okay.
request.
I noticed on the drawing, though, it spilled out onto the beach a little bit. Are you requesting that as well to be?
We were looking to, it's not written as such. When I talked to someone that has been facilitating this with us, I was then informed of the fact that, previously we were inside the pool complex. Should it be permitted, then yes, we would like to be able to take about a 20-foot space outside of that fence, just towards the water, on our beach area, Sandy Beach, just in that area.
How about we run it inside the fence this summer? and
That's perfectly
see how it
acceptable.
goes,
That's
and
what,
then when you come back for this in the fall
yep.
to renew your license, we can look at it then, just to make sure everything went kosher this year.
I didn't bring it up the first place because I'd be happy to be able to just go with the pre-existing versus push anything further.
Not that I expect any issues down there, but
I'm still there.
Okay. Anything else? Would you like to add?
No, I'm at the current time, just an update with the issuance, as I've made reference to the town clerks. We are still waiting for the food license. So at the current time, we would like to be able to get the application approved. And thus, once we provide the remaining, the state license for the food, excuse me, request the issuance.
Okay.
But again, no changes to things.
All right. Well, this is a public hearing, so if there are no more questions from counselors at this time, I would like, are there any butters? You come up?
Yeah.
If, please state your,
Brian.
Hi, I'm Stacy Patterson, 2 Brant Road. I abut them, and I don't have a problem with with you guys having a liquor license. Why I'm here is just to remind, because things change over time and memories change, is that I think it was 5 years ago when the original people went for it. They were using our road in the Pheasant Hill community with construction to get to their property. And we had said it's a slippery slope and we just want to make sure that all entrance to the property will go through their road. And we didn't want the slippery slope. And I like the questions you were asking, gentlemen, that, you know, for as far as expansion, if it ever becomes a restaurant, we're okay with that. We just don't want people coming through our neighborhood to get to their property. And that just wanted to, we had it put on record that that is an emergency use only access. There's a gate at the bottom of our hill and it's supposed to be for emergency access. It was at the last meeting minutes and it was drawn up. And I want to refresh everyone's memory, including the new owners as well, that that's the case. That's all. That's all I wanted to say, make my statement. So.
Sure.
Len?
I can hear you though.
You're talking about
Pheasant Hill. Yep.
Right.
Whereas their access should be Newport Harbor.
Newport
Drive.
Harbor Drive.
Right. But in the previous, there was a lot of stuff that they were slipping in there. Previous owners were doing different things and even before I got there. So I just wanted to speak to that. That's all.
So that's a.
It's a right of way emergency access.
Right, but for your purposes, that's something that is an education point for the owner to make sure their
Yes,
members.
but it's also
know.
a reminder for the town
Yes.
council that it's
Yeah.
on record is what
Yeah.
that's why I came here as a reminder that, you know, if they feel like expanding that we're not going through our neighborhood.
And I appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, that's
and I would just emphasize that's on the owner
Right,
to make sure that
Right.
everybody knows they can't use that.
right. And I appreciate that. I just, am-
I walk down there a couple of times a week and it
Yeah.
hasn't been used in the past few years. So that's, and it-
yeah, no, and I don't mind it being used for, you know, emergency
if a
purposes.
fire truck had to get through, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
you wouldn't have
No,
an
exactly.
issue.
Not, no, of course not. Not at all. I don't have a problem with you having a liquor license, even on the beach. It's not a problem. I don't have a problem with them having a liquor license. It's just, it was an avenue for me to, and then I have an agenda item I'm pressing for the future for parking in our neighborhood, but that's distinct. So, and I'd love to talk to you outside. All right, cool. Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President, I have a question. Do the changes that have been proposed by the last speaker and Mr. Hamilton have to be reflected in writing in any way? I guess the question is for our legal counsel, Mr. Gavin.
Well, the only change
'Cause
that
it
I
feels-
asked for is just to keep it inside the fenced
Keep it
area
inside
of
the
the
fence.
pool and not let it spill out onto the beach.
Right, but there's an application in front of us that shows a map with a yellow line that does spill out into the beach. So
Right,
I'm just
so-
wondering if anything has to be put in writing.
No, when when we make a motion.
Yeah.
The
To do
motion is
that.
to allow the outside service inside the gated area of the pool.
Right,
or
and then
fenced area of the
would the
pool.
motion also be to have some more explicit requirement to reflect what the last speaker was proposing?
It's really got nothing to do with the,
Right.
with the liquor license. It was more educational for us to remember that
Okay,
in the future, if somebody comes back and she misses the agenda item, she wants us to remember that this can't be a new access road,
okay, thank you.
something like that.
I would just add.
Okay.
The map,
Paraphrase it.
the map.
I can cite because honestly, I will say that there's been a few times that we have used it. That's probably why Stacy brought it up, that we had extensive damage from some of the new excavation to the road. That was just a binder coat. So we did use it for a short period of 2 days while we let the new concrete cure. So, yeah, so I'll make sure I touch base in the future.
Mr.
We
Gavin
do.
has a.
Just since the drawing accompanying the application, it has that expanded area. If it's approved to not include that for the time being, the map should be reflect the accurate license premises that's associated with the license. So the clerk has that. That has to be part of the application is a clear delineation of the license premises. So
Well, we can put that on the license itself.
right, not, I'm just noting that, not really for the purpose of the motion, but just for in terms of getting the paperwork properly filed.
New
Okay.
drawing,
You have to bring in a new map
do a new map.
before you get the license
I will do.
to reflect the fence.
I'll change the yellow line.
the yellow line. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the petition? This is a public hearing, so I have to ask. Gonna make me ask 3 times?
No.
No, good, thank you. Is there a hand raised? Mr. Crosby?
Good here. We just wanted to make sure that the public access to the shoreline is maintained. And we've gone through several owners of this property, and we've wanted to make sure that they were aware of their deed restrictions and their responsibilities for this access.
From what I've seen, Mr. Crosby, they've maintained it, cleaned it up. They're emptying the trash on a regular basis, specifically lined out parking spaces now. It's much better down there, but summertime's coming, so we need to make sure we can.
I can provide an
Make it better.
update just for everybody to hear. It was a little busy. I think that we've become the new point of access for outside of our community. People have found it's a wonderful asset, great parking, easy access to the beach and such, free, absolutely, closer than Newport or Middletown. Yesterday being the high temperatures, we had a lot more than the 20 vehicles that are permitted for there by our CRMC agreement. And we were there first thing this morning. I stopped by the town clerk because I've spoken with people of the council and such. And we cleared up everything this morning, trash wise. Again, I've spoken to teams that take care of like the landscaping maintenance, as was just discussed, to get on top of things. It just so happens starting today, again, we have staff 7 days a week, but we didn't have it as of yesterday. So we will have more regular occurrences of staff and ambassadors being there to check on these things and also control parking.
Oh, I need you to, yeah.
Yeah.
So we met the police chief and the fire chief, and before you guys were back on to the show, we met, and one suggestion is because for parking, they could put fire lane, and that's up to your organization to do that.
Just heard that 10 minutes ago,
Yeah, okay, so you're aware of that. So we should have a side meeting. And then also after dark, that's something we need to talk about, that, you know, people are showing up there at midnight, they're partying, they're loud. I don't mind people going to the beach, but they're hanging out in the parking area, and I abut it and it's loud, and I have to go out and be like, in my pajamas, could you please go away? So anyway, so that's what's happening. So maybe a dawn at 10 o'clock to 5 would be a good thing.
So with that, actually, the question came up with ownership. I'm the general manager of Narragansett Bay Club. I've been there since 2015 with a 1-year hiatus during the receivership. But I've been brought back a year ago to manage the club in its entirety again. The question does come up, and I asked if anybody knows to put a resolution to it. With the CRMC public access ways, is there a dusk to dawn parameter, or is it 24/7 access? The question has been asked of me.
You have to call Kevin Q.
All right, because I did not find it in our CRMC.
Or excuse me for interjecting, but we're beyond the liquor licenses, which is on the agenda.
Yeah, we're way
That's a
beyond it. So
separate-
this is a separate
separate
agenda
issue.
item. Yeah.
Separate issue.
But you brought it up, so good job. But anyway, but yeah, so we should talk, but
Another
anyway,
agenda.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, but I did write something recently for, not on their backs, but with the town, is the no parking, because there was like 40 cars in the neighborhood and people were drinking, and it's become the new free place. And so I just wrote an agenda item to get on, and we can talk about it there. You can
Have a public hearing.
have a public hearing, so that's, anyway, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay. All right, so.
A motion to close the public hearing.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0.
Motion to approve the liquor license for the Narragansett Bay Club with the outside service area to be within the fenced-in area of the pool only for this year.
Second.
Oh, and that they provide a new map to the clerk before issuance of said license.
Second.
Yeah, seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Okay. Next, we are moving on. We have
Their victualers license.
victular
Yeah.
license.
Motion to approve the victualers license for Narragansett Bay Club as well.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0.
Motion to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, next we have minutes. We have minutes from our executive session on April 25th, 2022. Town council minutes from April 27th, 2022, and also from May 9th, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, moving on to our town administrators report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. We were informed last week that our 2022 Department of Environmental Management, or DEM, recreation grant application for Elmhurst Park recreation improvements was not selected. DEM received 53 application requests for over $14 million in support for recreation facilities around the state. And unfortunately, they were only able to fund 16 projects in this round. With respect to Old Mill Lane, the demobilization of that natural gas injection site is complete. National Grid did not have to inject into the system this season. There were a total of 7 LNG truck deliveries in the initial setup and 1 additional truck delivery towards the end towards the middle of the season. National Grid is planning on fence work later this summer, and we will provide updates as plans develop. Sadly, Mary Taylor of Portsmouth passed away on April 24th. Mary proudly carried the Boston Post cane as the oldest resident in Portsmouth. The tradition of awarding the Boston Post cane to a town's oldest resident began in 1909. The Post reigned as the most popular newspaper in New England for a century until it folded in 1956. The newspaper distributed the cane to 700 towns in the Post circulation area, which included Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. They're made from ebony and topped with a 14-karat engraved gold knob. The canes are loaned by the towns, which coordinate their turnover to the next oldest resident, and our town clerk will manage this. And additionally, I'd just like to say this is a polite reminder that we are accepting nominations for the annual Portsmouth Award. The details are posted on the town website, and nominations will be accepted up to May 31st. And Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Okay, on to resignations and appointments. First item is appointment for the Conservation Commission.
Motion to approve, John Spencer?
All those.
Second. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. And next we have the Tax Assessment Board of Review.
Move to approve, Ellen Toner.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Okay. Moving on, old business number 1. It's authorization to select an electricity supplier for the community electricity aggregation plan and approve a resolution. Mr. Talipski.
Mr. President, Town Councilors, Richard Talipski, 79 Cromwell Drive. I'm the Director of Business Development for the town. We have worked for 3 years on an energy aggregation plan to provide savings in electricity costs to our citizens. We're ready to move on to the final stage of that. And I have Jamie Rhodes and his colleagues from Good Energy, our energy consultant. I'm going to turn it over to them for the discussion.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Aguilar, members of the council, thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and hopefully bring us to this near final stage of the process. And when Rich said that it's been 3 years, I literally said, oh my, I can't believe I've been doing this for 3 years. But as always, these things go as the speed that they have to go at. So we provided some information that's been forwarded to you, just to give a quick overview of where we're at this moment. Excuse me. So late in 2021, I believe the last time I was in front of the council was in December, was shortly after we began the process of evaluating the suppliers that were interested in bidding on the aggregations of the 6 communities in Rhode Island that have approved aggregation programs. This has involved us evaluating both their approach to how would they provide services to all of the individual communities, work with them on the contract language. This is the first time aggregation programs are taking off in Rhode Island. It's been involved some contractual negotiations as well. We've worked with the town solicitor on an early draft in December of the base electricity services agreement that we've had an opportunity to review. What we're doing now is adding to that the actual provision of what the supplier is going to provide. It's the additional exhibit to that contract, working out the terms with the suppliers, with the intention of in probably somewhere between June 7th and June 15th, given some fluctuations here, after June 7th, we'll just say that, to actually have those suppliers that are interested in providing electricity supply services to these aggregations to provide executable bids. So at this point, we've done indicative pricing, some indicative pricing with them. We've got trying to understand the lay of the market, the electricity market right now, which is volatile, as many people would, the general news would lead us all to believe. And the intention now is that after every community that is working with has been able to approve moving forward with an ESA to actually run one of those, to run that bid day, that competitive moment where they give executable pricing. One thing that we continue to tell folks is that because of the volatility of the electricity market, it's the industry standard is that these bids are open for 1 to 2 hours only. As electricity, at that time when we select them, they're going to begin the hedging process and actually executing contracts for the supply. If we wait too long, that number changes. So what we're asking folks to do is to authorize a member of the town administration, we've asked the town administrator, Mr. Rainier, to serve in this role to actually execute the contract when we see the rates come in. What we've done within the resolution as well as the materials is to provide some guidance on that. So it's not just an open, choose whatever you want supply situation. There's 2 primary limitations that there would be on executing the bid that day. The first is that we finish the contract review process with the solicitors in each of the communities, and that the contracts that are being presented are consistent with the plan that's been approved and the resolutions that the council has, the council has passed, as well as the statutes, the General Assembly statutes that govern the program. Our intention, we should within a week or so, give or take, have those documents available for the solicitor to review and to go through a line by line effort with. And the other piece is on pricing, is that National Grid has been providing some indicative pricing to the Public Utilities Commission regarding rates that are going to affect this October. These documents are totally available to everybody. There's no inside information here. But what the Public Utilities Commission has been asking them to do is to provide some indication of what pricing will be for electricity come October. In the most recent filing, they set kind of like a lower expectation and a higher expectation that range from 15.1 cents per kilowatt hour to 16.8 cents per kilowatt hour. This is the second time that they've done this type of report. The previous one had us about 14 cents per kilowatt hour, up to 15.5. So we're seeing each time they do another bid that it's going a little bit higher every time they set it. And so the limitation that we're seeking is that any bid to be considered responsive and available for us to accept has to be lower than the lowest rate that National Grid has put on the record. That way that even if National Grid comes in with that lowest rate, well, PPL after the notice today, it's going to take me a while to change my terminology here. Even if they come in at the lowest rate that they've been projecting, that still the rate being paid by Portsmouth residents would be below that. And once again, when those bids come in, we have the opportunity to select one or to reject all of them. So if the pricing doesn't come in at acceptable levels, we can reject all of it and then go back to bid at another time in the future, assuming the market conditions are acceptable for that. And so with me today, just so you know, I have 2 of my colleagues here, Good Energy, Patrick Roach, who some of you have met, and then Philip Carr, who's our regional director. oversees all of the work in throughout the New England market. Just as an opportunity to back up here in case you guys have questions that I'm not able to answer. We brought in additional folks. And just as a note in the process for this, as I mentioned before, we're going in front of each one of the communities to receive this approval before we go to do the bids. This afternoon, the Providence Board of Contract and Supply approved similar, actually it's the exact same standards for approval. We'll be at the Newport City Council meeting on Wednesday. And then South Kingstown and Barrington will be the beginning of June. We're going to wait on the approval from them before we actually do the bids. And then Central Falls, we're waiting for the next meeting of their purchasing board to approve similar restrictions on executing on a bid. And so that's where we're at for this. And just as a sense of should an acceptable bid come in June, the launch date for that would be October. So when the October rates change for last resort service, instead of folks moving to the 15.1 to 16.8 cents range with National Grid, they would be enrolled in the aggregation plan at the rate that we're able to secure in this bidding process. Roughly 2 months, the 2 months prior to that enrollment would be the bulk of our education and outreach program that you all have approved as part of the aggregation plan. It would begin with us doing the initial outreach, followed by a minimum 30-day period when folks can enroll or opt out of the program without ever participating before the program launches. And then what we expect to be a roughly 2 to 3 week period for the administration of actually enrolling all of the accounts with the new supplier that's selected. That takes a couple week process, which would be between the opt-out period and the actual launch of it. So procedurally where that would be. And once again, for any residents that want to opt out of the program, we'll be doing direct mailings to all of them. We'll be doing community meetings. We have a number of organizations to partner with there in the aggregation plan, as well as any other ideas that come up as we get from now to then, and new ideas or folks that we meet along the way to make sure that we continue to do as much of the education outreach as possible. And then once again, if anybody wants to opt out, they can do so. There's no cost, there's no fee for opting out or leaving the program, either prior to it starting or once the program's up and running. Folks are free to leave at no cost or expense to themselves. And sorry, going back one step, the expected contracts for this, we're expecting 1 to 2 year bids from the suppliers, so that we'd be locking in a rate for that period. It is our general expectation that the volatility in electricity markets isn't going away anytime soon, and that we expect the rates to continue to rise, which is why we believe that if we're going to get this program off the ground and to maximize savings against the constantly rising rates, to try to lock in a contract now, assuming that we're able to get acceptable pricing. And with that, I think that goes through the information I've provided as well as the steps, but happy to answer any questions that the council may have, and I'll call on my backup as needed.
I just had one quick question. Do you need all of the community's approval before you can take the bids?
I would say technically no, but we would prefer to have everybody moving together. So we want to be able to execute on that day when the bids come in, 6 independent contracts with the same supplier to provide the same services with each individual community. Conceivably, if one community decides not to move forward at this level, they do not have to, and we would move forward with the communities that want to.
So we would all be in at that same rate?
We would be all in at the same rate, yes. Sure.
Just a couple questions. Approximately how much lower than the National Grid price are you predicting your new supplier would be?
So I don't know. Standing here at this moment, I don't know. What we would do is asking the suppliers leading up to that bid day to provide indicative pricing so that we can be briefing the staff about what we expect. But unless there's additional information that you all have that I'm not aware of, we do not have an expectation at the moment how much far below that until we actually tell them that they have to give us a live price.
Okay. And also, even if they are below the National Grid price, is there a certain amount where they have to be way below, or your administrative fees would kick us back up to ending up paying a
The
bit more?
administrative fees is going to be in that price that they bid. So it's all the costs are included in that. There's no, they bid that and then the price ends up being any step level. No, what they bid has all the prices, taxes, fees, administrative costs, the profit margin of the suppliers, all of that is included in that price. So it won't change from that.
Okay. And I guess also, is there a provision for something to happen if the new supplier should go out of business or?
Yes, and so in the ESA that we've been working on with the solicitors, there's a bankruptcy provision of what we would, the obligations of the supplier, should they go bankrupt. Now, one thing that we've done is that they have to meet a minimum financial viability in order to qualify through our vetting process. So the suppliers that we're working with are nationally well-known companies that have significant financial assurances that they've been able to provide us as part of the review process. That being said, just in case of bankruptcy, there are provisions for recouping costs if necessary, but also that if the bankruptcy is such that we're not able to replace them, the provisions are there for individual residents to return to National Grid last resort service with no interruption of service to the individual residents, but they would be re-enrolled in the event that there's a bankruptcy that we're not able to cure.
And would the re-enrollment in National Grid put people at a higher level than people who had been with them?
It probably
and not
depends.
switched?
Yeah, sorry, it all depends on the time and what the rates are then. So if it, like, for example, if it happens a year from now, I don't know what National Grid's rate is a year from now. So if it's higher a year from now than what the aggregation program was, then they would be enrolled in the higher price.
And if the problem is not bankruptcy, but just an inability to provide energy, is there a provision for?
Yes, the same provisions there is that it's what's called all requirements power service. If they're not able to meet those requirements, which are set by the Public Utilities Commission and the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers has requirements that if you're going to be an electricity supplier, you have to meet these. You have to meet these requirements. If at any time they're not able to meet those requirements, they'll be considered in breach of contract. And then we can either exercise a remedy if there's damages, or we can terminate the contract unilaterally if they're not able to cure that breach.
And is there sort of an emergency backup plan so that you don't have to go to court to get people electricity?
Yes, there would be. What would happen is that if we're terminating the contract, we would notify National Grid that the residents, the accounts are moving back to last resort service at National Grid, and that can all be the change from the aggregation plan to that can happen within the 1 month period of the next time the meter is read. So the changeover can happen quickly, and at no time would residents be at risk of not having electricity supply, as National Grid is. That's why last resort service is there, is to serve as that backup of last resort.
So if there are, I don't know, 100 homes that aren't getting electricity, their remedy would be to.
Well, in like a storm event, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's still on National Grid. So National Grid still has to do, or PPL, I apologize. We'll still have to do the maintenance of wires and poles and all of that. So the same remedies that are available now, if they don't come and repair service, are the same remedies that we'd have in the future.
Are the people who sign up for this at any sort of, I don't know, are they put to the back of the line, for example, if they have a power outage during a storm?
No, that has never been our
PPL.
experience. National Grid has never shown any disparate treatment for any of the aggregation programs in other states that we work with them in Massachusetts. There's no difference because they make 100% of their money is made on the maintenance of the wires and poles in the distribution system. So if that goes down, they're at a financial loss for that.
And last question, what is a typical household savings joining the aggregation program versus staying with National Grid?
So we could pull data of how it has been at other with our Massachusetts clients. I don't have that right in front of me. I'd be more than happy to follow up with specific numbers for that. So I can't tell you exactly what that savings is going to be until we get those rates. But our experience has been somewhere from the 5 to 7% range is a good average. Right now, we're seeing significant savings with our Massachusetts clients, given that the Massachusetts rate has already spiked and our clients had locked in low rates. That we're seeing rates right now of like our programs have at 10 to 11 cent rates, while the National Grid and Eversource rates are 15 to 16 cents per kilowatt hour in Massachusetts. So obviously, as their rates change, that savings rate changes, and our goal is to be competitive in the summer and have much lower rates in the winter.
And last question, if
okay.
for some reason the PPL rate does go below the aggregation rate, we just have to live with that, right? adjustment down.
There's no adjustment down. That's correct. Once again, the best fail-safe for that is that residents can leave the program when that rate changes. And national or PPL does their announcements of when the rates come out at that point, and we can obviously tailor communications as such. Yeah, the idea is for us to lock in one rate for up to 24 months. And during that period, the PPL rates will change 4 times, 4 different rates. And as I tried to say this every time, I cannot guarantee that for each one of those periods, we would be lower than the national grid rate. But the intention and our success in Massachusetts has been that for that life of that contract, there would be a savings for somebody who participates.
And is there an ability to switch back and forth?
Yes. They could enroll, and then 3 months later, they could participate in the program. National grid rates or PPL rate goes down. 3 months later, they can enroll in that. They could stay in that for 6 months and then come back to the aggregation program following that. The idea is that the program is available for residents when they want it. And they do not have to stay with it if they do not want to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of course.
You have one question?
I just have a very brief question, much less. You probably told us this the last time when you gave us a presentation, but for people who have roof or ground mounted solar panels on their property, how does the rate at which they're selling electricity back to the grid change under this arrangement?
So the rate that they get paid for the generation of electricity is governed wholly separate by whichever agreement they have with National Grid, whether it's net metering or renewable energy growth. This would just be for any electricity they purchase to supplement what they generate.
Further questions?
Yeah, a couple.
Sure.
So for somebody sitting at home,
Yes.
reading their electric bill, what rate are you looking at on their electric bill that you're going to change? Just the energy charge, or you're going to change all the distribution charges and everything stay the same?
Yes, all the distribution charges stay the same. I actually have an electricity bill right here to make sure I get the terminology correct. It is a supply services portion of it. That right now, somebody who's on last resort service, it'll say supply services, right under that supplier and National Grid. And then it has the product they're enrolled in and the rate. And so what would change is the supplier name and then what the rate is under that. But all the delivery services costs are the same and identical, no matter who's the supplier is.
So looking at mine right now, it's 0.0781 cents.
Yes,
And that's going to go, I know it's going to go up.
that's going to go
It's
up.
going to go up. Previous meetings, we've had a triple or 3 or 4 options. Are you planning on still offering those 3 options? And when we or the council voted last time to enter this plan, it was at the 10% renewable level, which is actually higher than your typical level. So people really won't see a decrease if they're all opted into the 10% level.
Yes, so the intention is still to offer the same plans, both the basic product, which would have the same renewable energy as the state minimum that all supply has to have, which is 19% in 2022. The default product, we've been asking to quote at 10% additional renewable energy. Given the volatility of the market, we've had conversation with the suppliers about adjusting that down to meet the market needs, and we can revisit that in the future. The idea being that if we're going to bring in a rate lower than that National Grid rate, if we have to adjust the default amount of renewable energy, then that's one of the variables that we can adjust on that bid day based off of the responses from suppliers. And then additionally, the 50% and 100% renewable will still be there, and those are optional products for those who want it.
My main concern is that we save customers money.
Mhm.
And the plan that we have selected as a council won't do that. And in this day and age, I would implore this council to change the levels and just go with the basic plan to save people money rather than going into the renewable plan, whatever negotiating you can do. But the basic plan would save people money at this point in time, if done correctly,
Got it.
rather than renewable. I want to save the planet, but when you go out and look down the street at $4.75 a gallon of gas, any other penny on an electric bill is going to hurt.
Yes.
So
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Okay. Yep. So some comments or questions. Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. My understanding of this is that council is going to authorize the forcibly changing of everybody's electric bill from one provider to another in terms of the electricity itself. Presumably, at least as far as I can see, this is because we don't actually trust people to do the right thing. And so they opt out to keep what they already have, which seems to me that we're interfering between two parties to a contract, National Grid or possibly some other energy provider and the individual users. We were making a foray into the electricity business in town. Town lacks the expertise for this. We've done this once before and it didn't go well for us. And, I'd like to, it's too late, I think, to change this because I think I see where this is going. But I really object to forcibly changing contracts to which the town is not a party to. And I question whether any of that's really legal. But people of the town of Portsmouth are smart enough to make their own decisions. It shouldn't require the council for renewable energy purposes to forcibly make this decision for them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Any further comments or questions from counselors? So what's before us is seeking permission to allow Mr. Rayner to, I guess, secure the bid. If the bid is acceptable, to provide Mr. Rayner the power to agree to that and enter into the contract. And then the contract has to be reviewed by our solicitor just for conformance. And if that's the rate, and the town of Portsmouth, along with the other communities, would all be locked into that rate.
Yes,
For a one or 2 year period.
yes, for the aggregation program would be
For the
committed to that
aggregation
rate.
program.
Yes.
And I think I just wanted to follow up on one quick question that, or comment that Mr. Hamilton made, just for clarification. The price that we're agreeing to, or the price that you're going to be taking the bids on, is for the basic rate, but then if for our situation, we asked for the
Additional.
next level up. So how is that structured?
Yes, thank you for getting
Just to-
clarity on that. Yeah, the primary point of comparison will actually be the default service, which would be the state minimum renewable energy plus 10%. So that's the number we're going to compare to National Grid's last resort service. So I recognize there's a bit of an apple and an orange here. What we're going to do is, for us to find it an acceptable bid, the renewable energy content of that supply would be 29%, comparing to National Grid's 19%. And that rate has to be lower than National Grid's 19% rate in order for us to consider it an acceptable contract. And then as I was saying to Mr. Hamilton before, that if we see reason that we cannot bring that rate in at 10 with the additional 10% in, to adjust that downwards as low as 5% in order to make sure that we're able to meet that competitiveness. And if that is not possible, we would consider the bids non-responsive and not select one. Right. Thank you for letting me clarify that.
I just want to clarify my understanding of the authorization in front of us. Is that would authorize Mr. Rayner to execute.
Hold on a second.
I could hear it from up here.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't mine. Okay.
So it would authorize Mr. Rayner to execute an ESA if that criteria are met. But it does not require him to? In other words, if you see circumstances present that give you pause, that he has discretion? I'm asking if that's how I read it, is it authorizes, but it does not require, which I support because circumstances can always be unforeseen.
It's both he and the solicitor.
Hmm.
Solicitor has to review the contract.
Right, fine, yes. Thank you.
And if I may, that was the intention of how this was drafted, was to allow it to be.
That is how I read
Yes.
it, but I never like to just assume that how I
Right.
read it is
That's correct.
how everyone gets it. Thank you.
Mr. President, I think everyone on the council would agree with the statement that the residents of Portsmouth are, quote, smart enough to make their own decisions. And I believe that this offers them the options to do so and save money. So I would make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Okay. Next, we have our monthly finance reports. Ms. Lasky.
Honorable Council, as of the end of March, the town is 75% through fiscal year 2022. General fund revenues are at 78% of total budget as compared to 76% in the prior year. General fund expenditures are at 75% compared to 73% in the prior year. The S&P bond rating call took place May 16th, and we should have the rating determination by May 26th. And good news was the severe winter storm in January has been declared a federal disaster, qualifying the town for some assistance. At this point, we don't know the extent. And overall, despite significant challenges this past fiscal year, the town is still projecting to break even or have a small surplus at year end.
Thank you, Ms. Lasky.
Can I just make a comment on it, specifically towards the reimbursement?
Yeah.
We'll take that reimbursement and put it back in the reserve fund for snow removal.
Do you need a, I don't know if you need a motion or anything.
Well, I'm asking, that would be my request, that we put it back there since that's where we took it from, correct? Essentially.
Yes, we have done, we have.
We had to go
did-
into that
We did have
to-
to go into the fund,
Right.
reserve fund.
So I would make a motion that, or should I bring it back on the next agenda probably?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, I think that needs to be on the next agenda. I would
so that we-
support that.
But to put that back in the reserve fund.
As the finance director stated, we don't know the amount yet. It'll be
Right.
75%, but there are still meetings that have to happen with RIEMA and FEMA before they determine 75% of what.
Right, if it's 75% of $1,000, it's $750, that goes
Sure.
back in, but whatever that number is, it should go back into the reserve fund for the next big winter storm that might not be covered.
As a clarification, if it goes above the, so say the winter storm, because we have personnel included in that, things like that, how do you want to just the entire amount to be put back into the fund? Because I can make note of that.
I think we'll have to see what those,
Just
so let's take a look at and see what was
When they
eligible.
sit down and talk to staff, and particularly Ray, they'll be looking at what our police costs were, fire costs, anything else that was associated with the storm.
Yeah, just the DPW costs
Okay.
would be what I'd be looking to get back in there.
Okay.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0.
Mr. President, a point of order. I'd like to, on new business, move item number 5 to be item number 1 because we've been informed that the police chief has other business that he has to attend for.
Okay.
Attend to.
All right, so let us take the new business number 5.
I'll second that.
All those in
It's
favor?
supposed to be a motion.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye, motion passes 6-0. So now we will listen to Chief Peters with his request to purchase 2 patrol vehicles from the newly established Emergency Vehicle Apparatus Capital Program for the amount of $140,977.66.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the council, I'm here tonight to request the amount of $140,977.66 to be coming from the Emergency Vehicle Apparatus Capital Program. This will be for the purchase of 2 2022 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicles that would be used for our patrol division. The vehicles will be purchased from Colonial Municipal Group. The price per vehicle is $70,488.83, which includes the outfitting of the vehicle as well as the equipment and the paint associated with it.
Approximately when's your delivery?
Great question.
It won't be before
won't-
July 1st, I bet.
It will definitely not be before July 1st.
So this is next year's.
I think we'll be getting them probably it'll be the new year, that's for sure, the new calendar year.
Yeah, they've been 6-9 months in the making.
Motion to approve the purchase of the 2 vehicles with the capital fund. Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to continue on to new business number 1, and it's a request to install a little free library on Bristol Ferry Town Common. And Ms. Tyson. Good evening.
Good evening.
We do have, I think we have the PDF of it.
Yeah.
Just tell us what you'd like to do.
I'm sure you guys have seen the little free libraries. A lot of people have them in front of their homes. Some of them are, I know they just put one up at the MLK Center down in Newport. So I thought about putting one in our yard, but then I realized that, we have kind of a nice little common area, and I thought it would be great to be able to share it with the rest of the community. So my hope is to put one somewhere on the Bristol Ferry Town Common. The exact location, I'm not sure what part is owned by the town and what part might be owned by the railroad. I did get approval from the ladies that kind of run the Bristol Ferry Town Common Commission. So, and I would take care of the installation and the first book stocks.
So based on the looks of it, it would be best to get a book and sit on that bench. So I would make a motion that we approve location number 1.
That was my preference. I just, I wasn't sure who owned that. The sign for the Bristol Ferry Town Common is there, so I assumed that was that property
us.
and not,
We
it is,
got it.
okay, so it's not, that's not part of
It's
the,
separated by the road, and then there's a 20-foot right of way on either side of the road by
I'll second.
the railroad, so. you'll be
okay,
fine near
but
that
that's not
bench.
considered the railroad property. Okay, great.
And I don't
so-
think DOT is gonna come down and make you take it down
Okay,
either, even
good.
if it is.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. There's no questions, comments. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye, motion passes 6-0. You are all set. Good
Excellent.
luck.
And thank you.
Thank you very
much.
much. Appreciate it. Come grab a book.
And sit on the bench.
All right, next we have new business number 2. It's that's one, I'm sorry, that's one withdrew. Number 3, it's the Town of Portsmouth Pension Plan First Quarter 2022 Summary. And we have, is it on Steve?
Yeah, it's Steve Gettleman with Principal. And I see that I got 30 minutes by my name. I definitely don't have to take all of that, but I'm willing to answer as many questions as you may have. I did put together a short summary of a full report that I sent earlier on to Lisa. So I'll plan on talking to that unless we need to get into a little bit more of the details regarding the plan. Just a little bit about where we're at today with the plan and a little bit more about Principal. the town of Portsmouth made the decision to move their retirement plan assets to Principal in the fourth quarter of 2021, and we received those assets at Principal. I think the bulk of the assets came in on December 29th of 2021. So the report that I pulled together is going to run for the first quarter, since we basically started our relationship with you on 1/1 of 2022. Not the best starting point in time, but that's where it ended up. As far as Principal, Principal is a retirement plan leader in the industry. As a company, we've been around for 145 plus years, and today we manage around $715 billion in assets, and that would be as of 3/31. We are a leader across the retirement plan spectrum regarding DB plans, defined contribution, including 403B and 401k plans, non-qualified plans, and ESOPs. But we're obviously focusing in on the defined benefit plan today. I've been with Principal for 34 years. I've been working with retirement plans for over 20 years. I look forward to working a relationship, and at some point in time, I'd like to have an opportunity to be out there and meet you in person and provide this report in person. So that's a little bit about, well, just one more thing. I represent Principal Global Asset Allocation within Principal. So we're a kind of a subset of Principal Global Investors. We provide investment advisory services for 637 clients with around $30 billion in assets. So you would be one of those 630 clients where we're providing asset allocation services for the plan. And I work with around 10 other municipalities, in some up in the Northeast and others in the Southeast of the US. So I'll open any questions or comments about Principal, and maybe how the plan came to Principal give a little bit about that process, or any other questions before we start talking about the economy and markets and your plan specifics regarding the investment performance.
Any comments from counselors?
I guess, I'd like to hear generally how you are adopting a different investment strategy than our prior asset manager.
I mean, I wouldn't say we're really adopting anything different. I mean, we were both, your plan, we look at the funding level of your plan. You're obviously looking to have the markets help close that. So we did not really change the risk return spectrums too much of the plan. Prior to coming to Principal, you had a 65% return seeking, 35% fixed income. We did increase the return seeking portion of the allocation, which would include international and US equities. We also wanted to include a component of real estate within our allocation. So that was kind of the main differences in the inclusion of the owned real estate. We haven't been able to execute on that yet because we do have the manager we chose to implement the owned real estate solution has an inbound queue. So they're kind of queuing up clients to be able to enter the portfolio. So that hasn't been open to us yet, but at some point in time, we hope to do that. And the real estate I'm talking about is directly owned real estate. So we're not investing in a REIT, which would be real estate investments that are available through the equity markets, but we would directly go into the private real estate. So owning the brick and mortar of these properties, and it would be a high quality commercial real estate portfolio. I think today the portfolio has around 140 properties, around $10 billion worth of properties in about 140 different metropolitan locations across the US. So well diversified across property or geographic location and property type.
Can I ask you, and I don't know if you know this offhand, but I mean, I think it's fair to say we switched to you guys because we were not that happy with our last investment advisor. And I'm just wondering if you could sort of generally compare how you did for your municipalities versus how we were doing with our prior investment advisor.
I didn't have a lot of detailed information on your prior manager's performance, so it's really hard for me to do a comparison. I mean, I think what we try to do is provide you a well-diversified asset allocation strategy across different asset classes and investment styles and managers. And hopefully we can do that on a consistent basis for the plan and provide performance, at or around the benchmark that we feel comfortable, that you feel comfortable with in measuring us over time.
And are you compared to other investment advisors who are managing other municipal assets? Are you able to tell us, how you compare in this last quarter with your returns generally? I mean, you must be, that must be your selling point, right? Like we can manage your money and do a bit better for you.
Right.
Must
Well,
have to look at what other folks are.
a lot of that information comparing against other municipalities is not necessarily readily available. We get like annual updates and so forth, so we don't get it quarter by quarter. How I kind of show our performance is against a benchmark of similar of indexes made up of a similar allocation to your plan. And it's our goal that over a full market cycle, 3 to 5 year time periods, that we're able to add value and be at or ahead of that benchmark of indexes over time. I will be able to probably pull in some outside information regarding other municipalities, but again, that information kind of comes to us slowly over the year, and it isn't available. Here we are, 6 weeks after quarter end. That other type of comparative information would not be available against other municipalities, but I could work to provide some comparisons, but we'd probably have to go back to 2021, which would be prior to when Principal became involved with your investments for your plan.
Well, I guess what's more important is to see that you guys are doing for us as good or better a job as other investment advisors are doing for other municipalities, right? So it would be, I don't know what evidence you would have to establish that, but that certainly would be a basic question that any of your clients would have, would it not?
Sure, and I can look into that and can see what other comparison information we can be able to pull together for you. Again, we'd be looking at a very short time period for your plan, being we've only managed the money just over a quarter. But that's something that maybe I can take as a takeaway and see what type of benchmarking we could provide and share with the committee on a go forward basis.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments at this point from the council? Steve, we are going to open it up. I believe there'll be a question coming from the public.
Hi, Tom Grieve, 110 Thayer Drive. This performance is our first quarter with Principal. It was a little lower than the benchmarks, but certainly not out of the range. I'd like to know what our pension investment committee's evaluation of this performance was.
We'll have to be getting that from our pension committee. We'll have to seek their input.
They have not seen this yet?
I don't know.
No, they haven't. It just came out.
I forwarded the full report on a week or so ago, and then provided the summary for today's meeting. I have not had an opportunity to meet with the pension committee yet, so I have not heard their feedback.
Okay, the pension committee is where the feedback that, the professional feedback that we need to get on this should come from.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I do agree. And I think as we heard, it's only been the first quarter, and it was, I think the general picture is pretty bleak.
Oh, I
think we all
agree. It's
know
going to
that.
get bleaker.
Right.
Yeah,
Believe me, the next one's worse.
Yeah, the
So-
second quarter has been a very similar to the first quarter. Higher interest rates, lower equity markets, which has been a challenging time period. I mean, and your plan takes steps to kind of smooth that out. You smooth out your gains and losses over time periods, so it kind of levels out the plan's return over longer time periods, so you don't have these peaks and valleys. Like obviously 2021 would have been a peak. It's looking like 2022 may be a valley. So there's certain things that your actuary does to kind of smooth this out so the plan's not a little bit easier to plan and work with the plan on a go forward base on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, from the council's perspective, we just received this. We will now forward it on to our pension committee. And I think that will be our normal course of action moving forward, that every time we do receive a report, we will pass that along to our pension committee to
Yeah,
also
and
get their feedback.
Yeah, and I would be more than glad to meet with them, go through the report, take their questions and get the feedback from them directly, if that's the normal mode of operation for the town.
Well, I think we're probably going to be charting a new course here and getting a little more input from our pension committee as we move forward, working with you in a more cohesive manner than what we've done previously. So I think this is a new opportunity, and I think we're off to a good start here with the building blocks, having you come before us tonight. And I think, the next step would be to pass this along to our pension committee and then introduce you to the pension committee as well.
I don't know if we want to go into any level of detail today on the plan's performance. I just would point out one thing. We showed a quarterly return of, I'm on the page 5 of the summary report, just looking at the quarterly performance. Just look, we're down minus 5.65% for the quarter versus our weighted index, which again is a pool of the index. We use the S&P 1500 for the U.S. stock market, the MSCI all country world index ex-US for international, and then we use the Bloomberg aggregate for our bond index. And so we were about 40.48 or 48 basis points behind the benchmark. The only thing I would point out to the committee is that that's net of any investment management fees. So your investment management fees run around 30 basis points. So we're on an actual performance, factoring out the expenses, we were down about 18 basis points versus the benchmark. And obviously your benchmark doesn't have any fees associated with it. But I did want to point that out, that in our reporting, we will show you our net performance. And so it does reflect the management fees already taken out of our performance.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, so let me know how you want me to work with the town's investment committee, or if there's any follow-up questions from the town council regarding the pension plan.
I think the biggest thing we're looking for is a more active management than we had at the previous group, because even in times of relative good markets, we weren't getting the returns that we were expecting. So we're hoping for a lot more from you.
Okay, well, we'll see hopefully we can work on that and meet your expectations. And I think that, key part of that is just open communication. So I'll give you our quarterly reporting and then look for any feedback that you may have.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Steve.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you again, Steve.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and drop off. But again, if there's any comments or questions, please let me know.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to new business number 4. It's the Portsmouth School Department FY 2023 proposed facility capital budget request. Dr. Kenworthy.
Thank you, Mr. President. So no new information here. I made this same proposal during the budget process. And I know there was a provisional approval. We're just looking for a final step in this process for approval of the use of these impact fees to be able to move ahead with the 2 projects that we identified. The classroom floor replacement at Portsmouth Middle School for a number of classrooms, which will also couple with some new furniture that we're purchasing through our ESSER grant funding, and then the replacement of the stadium lights at the Portsmouth High School Athletic Complex. So a total use of impact fees there for $402,172.
Motion to approve.
Second.
With one quick question. And this is kind of a sidebar, but when you talk about the $1.323 million or the 3% that's needed every year,
Mhm.
is that a line item in the budget, or does that include the use of the fact that we'll be using about $2 million a year? Does $2 million a year for the bond count for that?
I don't know if Mrs. Lasky knows for sure the answer to that question.
we need-
And is the bond payment actually that much per year?
Well, whatever the bond payment is, but does the cost of the bond, 500,000, 600,000, go towards that 1.3? Or is the state expecting us to put $1.3 million of capital into your budget every year? I think we need to find out that, because that's a big nut in the future budget plans. It doesn't have to be found out tonight.
Yeah, and I can definitely find out the answer for you. Again, I didn't want to misspeak, so I didn't know if.
They
Ms.
are
Lasky
forcing
had
it, it's
any-
state law.
Well,
I can guarantee you, if we don't do it, they'll be here.
I believe it does. I believe it's anything that's spent on those required.
The
items.
premium of the bond.
The state budgets have a way of leaving little words out that don't let you use things that account for it and hurt us more than other towns. So I just want to make sure
I will definitely get the answer.
that whatever the cost is yearly that we're spending
It
on the
includes-
bond
Yep.
includes that.
And are all Rhode Island municipalities meeting these requirements right now?
Nope.
Again, I would assume that they are aware of what the percentages are and what they should be doing, and that there is oversight by the Rhode Island Department of Education. And we just try to make sure that we are fully aligning with what we should be.
We can only control our schools.
Correct.
We
But
all
I
have
want to make
schools.
sure that we're following the rules, and if the rules don't allow us to use that against that 1.3, we need to go back and try and change that.
I will definitely get an answer on that. And
Thank
I
you.
just don't want to misspeak. about
Nope. Exactly, unfunded state mandate. That's what I'm talking about, Andrew.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second to allow the use of the impact fees. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. All right, well, that concludes our new business. On to future meetings. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 13th. Then June 15th is our budget hearing. It's a Wednesday at the Portsmouth Middle School, followed by June 27th and July 11th.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 6-0. Thank you all.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.
Yes.
What's it?
Yes. Memorial Day.